Hey everyone, and welcome to our April Live Q&A with National Quilter Circle. We have Toby Lishko back as our special guest this month, so thank you for being here, Toby.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back. I'm really looking forward to doing this challenge.
Oh, good. Okay, so that's, of course, why we have you on today, specifically why we scheduled our live Q&A to be today, because as you mentioned, the challenge. So you have designed the quilt for our current quilt block challenge, and that starts today. So we'll get into some more information about the actual challenge itself and signups and all of that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the quilt itself, sort of how many blocks it is, your inspiration for designing it, all those good things.
Okay, well, the inspiration was I was so much looking forward to spring because with this winter was just so long and dreary that I needed something to brighten up, a project to brighten it up. So I picked out baskets and flowers. So I called the quilt Baskets and Blooms. And I thought with people stuck in their houses, be harder to shop for fabric. So this is a quilt that they can do with their scraps, they can do with solids. So they really don't have to shop for anything new. They can kind of use up their stash and do something fun. The blocks aren't hard. There are 18 blocks. And we do 3 a week for 6 weeks. And then the last week we put it all together. And I think it's going to be, even for beginners, I think it's a quilt that anybody can make.
Absolutely. And it is, like you mentioned, the blocks are fairly easier blocks, and they are sort of larger blocks. They finish, 12-inch finished blocks, so they're larger blocks. And so that's something that makes it a little bit easier too, so you don't have to worry about such teeny tiny little pieces. And of course, this is made up of some of your standard quilt pieces, if you will, your half square triangles, flying geese, that kind of thing. So if you are interested in participating in the Quilt Block Challenge, again, we mentioned that it starts today. So you can sign up for that on the website. You can join the NQC Quilt Block Challenge Facebook group page. And today, being day one, you get fabric requirements, correct? And you get the first start of the information.
Right, yeah. The fabric requirements were given last week. And you can use, now I listed 12 fabrics. One was the background fabric. And then I had four shades of green, shades of red, 2 shades of blue, and a yellow and a gold. But I mean, that was just suggestions. So you can use any colors you want. Think about flowers and think about baskets and be creative. We're not the quilt police. We're not going to tell you how you have to make your quilt. So have fun and be as creative as you want to be with this quilt.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, that's one sort of perk that I get in pattern testing your pattern is that I get to see obviously all of the instructions beforehand and get to make the blocks before everyone else. And I did use your fabric requirements for the background fabric because I wanted all of my blocks to have the same background. But I've definitely, for all of the other blocks, just kind of been pulling scraps from my stash in random colors just to sort of put the blocks together. So I know you have a few of them that you went and grabbed. Do you want to show us some of the blocks?
Yeah. Okay. There's my husband walking behind me.
See, we're going to get him involved in the quilt challenge too. He doesn't know it yet, but he is going to be part of it.
Here's block 1. It's a basket. So each month you're going to do 2 baskets and 1 flower. So here's block 1. That's the first basket. Very simple. You do the half square triangles, and I wrote the directions so they're overcut so you can square them down to size because a lot of people don't like working with bias seams, but don't be afraid of half square triangles because they're not as hard as they look. And so that's the first basket. Here's the first flower, and most of these blocks are made with half square triangles, squares, some are rectangles. So they're all 12-inch blocks. Here's flower 2. This is my light pink, and this is my pink. So, and that's my dark green. And then this is block 3, which is another basket. So they're not hard at all. But if you do have challenges and challenge making them, Ashley and I will help you through it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the way we learn how to quilt.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to show one of mine because I have it sitting right here, just so you can kind of see, like, I think on yours you had maybe also blue here, but then I changed up different colors for my basket here. So yeah, just like we were mentioning, pretty much any fabric you want to use, any color, you can do this. So I want to say hi to everyone watching. We have people watching Arizona, Oregon, Salt Lake City, Virginia, Wisconsin, Ontario, everywhere. So I think this is a great time not only to have people on to ask quilting questions. So if you have any questions you want to ask quilting related, challenge related or not, could be just quilting question, please type those into the orange comment box below. If you're watching on the website or if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can just comment anywhere. But want to make sure you're using the orange chat box and not the green one because they do go different places and we don't see the green one live right now. So make sure you're using the orange one. But so back to our challenge and the blocks. I know you mentioned that they are, cut oversized, so you can trim them down if you don't want to use, the bias cut fabrics, things like that. But again, if you mentioned this is a beginner pattern, but if this is my first ever quilt that I'm ever making, what are you going to say to me to make me not intimidated to make this?
Well, I would imagine Ashley's going to do some videos to walk you through some of the different techniques for making half square triangles,
Mhm.
because that's basically what the first quilt is, a first block is. And I'll be writing a little blog and giving instructions too. So um, most of the time, beginner quilters start with squares and half square triangles. It's hard to make a flower with just squares and rectangles. So um, uh, I wouldn't let the quilt or the block intimidate you at all because like I said in the instructions there's step by step. There's a page where it gives you basic instructions on how to get your quarter inch. I'll talk about in my blog how to get an accurate quarter inch, and just follow along. The quilting community on Facebook is real supportive, and when you post something and you have a problem, everybody will help you out, and of course Ashley and I will help you out too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, you have your blog and you'll be doing that. And then I'll be doing stuff on the Facebook group page. And I think it's great that we are both doing things because we both have different sort of techniques and ways of doing things. I know we both do our quarter inch seam and a little bit different in terms of how we mark that. I know you like to put, I'll let you explain this in a minute, but put something on your machine that allows you to put your fabric up against it. And that gives you your quarter inch. I like to just use my quarter inch foot and just go with it because I know I've used it and I know that it works. But what's your method for your accurate quarter inch seam?
Well, I used a little. Oh, I'm going to move the camera to show my little seam guide that I use. If you see on my machine here, my little green machine. Okay, can y'all see this?
You can see the
I have a
machine.
little. Can you see it? Where my
There you go,
finger
the
is?
little grasshopper machine.
Okay. So, oh wait, I got to move it over a little bit. Okay, so here's a little. It's Dr. Scholl's Mulfoam foot pad. And I use a little ruler and I establish my quarter inch seam. And then every time I'm sewing, my fabric's touching this. So it's going to be an accurate quarter inch. The only problem with using the quarter inch foot is every quarter inch foot's different. So if I set up all my machines using that little tool, then I know I'm going to have an accurate quarter inch no matter what sewing machine I use.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great technique, especially for me. With the way I put my pins in my fabric, my pins stick out to the outside edge of my fabric, so I can't really have something on my machine like that because my pins get in the way, and that's just sort of, I think everybody, no matter what your method is, you kind of find whatever works for you and then you kind of get into that groove. And like, I don't think I could change at this point because that's just the way
Right.
I've always done it.
Well,
So,
no, I think it works. Whatever works for you. Whatever works for every quilter. Every quilter is different. But
yeah,
I mean, if somebody's struggling with a quarter inch seam allowance, they can always try your method or my method or any method that they see just to
yeah.
establish that consistent quarter inch. And then once you get that quarter inch right and your seam's consistent, then everything goes together so much better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned that everyone kind of has their own way of doing it. As long as you are consistent within your piecing and your blocks, you can sort of fix things if needed, right? So if you've made all of your blocks and every single one of your blocks is coming out a little bit over or a little bit under, rather than remaking every single block, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, I mean, if they're off just a little bit, most of these blocks have what I call coping strips around them. And so you can always square them up to be all the same size. You know, I wouldn't worry about that much. I like some people may be off a quarter of an inch. So if you are, you know, you can always make adjustments. But if all your blocks are the same, there's no sashing or anything in this quilt. All the blocks go together. So as long as they're all the same size, the quilt's going to come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
So while
going
accuracy is very important, consistency is like right up there with it.
Okay. I'm going to go out and come back in a minute because you guys are frozen and I want to reboot my thing. Okay. So go ahead
Okay.
and talk for a minute.
Okay, I think we all know I can talk. We're pretty good at that. So obviously we know that everybody is sort of stuck in their house working from home, and we're all on either Wi-Fi. Some things are working, some things are not. So we're having some technical difficulties, but we'll get her right back on to talk some more about the Quilt Block Challenge. And of course, again, if you have any questions related to the challenge or questions related to quilting, please don't hesitate to ask those. She is a expert here, so she can answer any of your quilting questions. But again, to sign up for the challenge, you can do that. I believe there's a banner on the page even to click, and all you have to do is enter in your email. So one thing I do want to say with that, because I think a lot of people that have signed up previously are waiting or
Okay.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for sticking with us through our technical difficulties. Hopefully we have those resolved for now. But like I was mentioning with the signing up for the challenge, so when you go ahead and put in your email, the very next screen to pop up is where you're going to see download fabric requirements now. So I think a lot of people think as soon as they sign up that they're going to get, the ding of an email getting emailed to them right away with fabric requirements, and that's not the case. So as soon as you sign up, you can hit download fabric requirements on that same page. And then now, obviously, our challenge has started today, so emails are going to start going out today, and then they'll go out every single week. But so just make sure you don't miss that step. If you do and you don't see them and you close out that page, not a huge deal. We'll also have that on the Facebook group page too. So there is no shortage of ways that you'll be able to find it. But so yeah, that's on our. Don't hesitate to ask those. But we do have a question here from Annette, and she wants to know what your opinion on pre-washed fabric versus straight off the bolts.
Make a lot of wall quilts, and I never wash my wall quilts. They just get thrown in the dryer to get the dust off of it. But lately, somebody I have fabric in my shop, and I got an email from a lady saying that one of her fabrics bled a lot, and she couldn't get the bleeding out. And I thought most fabrics today are unless except batiks, are usually they don't bleed. So I cut a piece off, and it was bleeding really bad. It was a dark navy blue. And so I had to stick it in hot water and keep washing it until all the blue came out, until it stopped bleeding. So I would suggest if it's something that you're going to wash, like a bed quilt or something that's going to be used a lot, a baby quilt is used a lot, then I would wash the fabrics before I made the quilt, just to make sure that nothing bleeds, and so that everything shrinks together. So you're going to wash the top fabrics and the backing, so that everything is already shrunk. What it shrinks usually, they say 2 to 3%.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Perfect. I have to say, I am a huge fan of just fabric straight off the bolt as opposed to pre-washing, just because I am always usually in such a hurry to I want to get my fabric and come home and sew right away. But I also like the feel of fabric straight off the bolts, sometimes a little bit better. But so you mentioned that you cut a little strip to see if it was going to bleed. Can you explain your process there? What did you do?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different processes. You can get something called retain. No, is that what it is? No. Yeah, retain. And what it does is it helps take the dye out of the fabrics. Or you can just keep washing it in hot water, really hot water, until you
Yeah.
don't see any dye in it anymore. There are also those sheets that you can stick in your washer called, what are they called?
Those color catcher things.
Catcher things, yeah.
Yeah.
But even after using that, I still think that I would wash it, stick it in the sink, and put hot water in it just to make sure that it's not bleeding anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So that's always be a good thing to test, especially if you're just unsure of the fabric and it is a very dark color. So I'm probably not going to pre-wash everything, right?
Well, I mean, you want to, if you're going to pre-wash one fabric in your quilt, you want to pre-wash
Oh,
all of
yeah.
it. But
Yeah, in the same project, yeah.
right. But really, if the ones that are going to bleed usually are red, navy blue, or black. Those are the ones that bleed the most. And orange, a really bright orange, may bleed too. So those are the colors to look out for if you're going to put them in a quilt, to make sure that they don't bleed. If you plan on
Yeah.
washing the quilt or giving it away and they're going to wash the quilt, and you don't want them to wash a quilt and then it would bleed all over the other fabrics.
Yes, that would kind of be a bummer if someone got this beautiful quilt as a gift and then the first time they washed it, that's what happened. So
Right.
just even if you didn't, so say you're halfway through a quilt that you're going to make for somebody else and it has those stop right now and sort of because you can't really. So I would just say you're going to have to finish that quilt. But then once you gift it, if you have not pre-washed those fabrics, I definitely would let the recipient know that they haven't been pre-washed and they either need to wash accordingly or use a color catcher or use something so they're not disappointed. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. You mentioned aside from batiks, things don't usually bleed. Do batik fabrics, do you have to treat those differently?
No, I mean, you don't like it's the same thing with batiks. It's just the darker fabrics that bleed. If it's a print, batik print, normally they don't bleed because they've got so many colors in them. But if you have a solid black or solid navy or solid red, yeah, I would pre-wash those.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay. So another question, because I know these are sort of the hot button questions we get all the time, pre-washing versus not pre-washing. And another one that I was even recently talking to someone about on one of our podcast episodes was pressing with steam or without steam, and whether that affects your fabric, is good, bad for seams, or otherwise. What is your opinion on that?
I know you and I differ on that.
I know.
We both start the same process. We both finger press before we do anything.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I feel I always use dry iron, only
Mhm.
because even the best irons spit, and I mean, I just always have a problem with them spitting dark something on my white fabric. So,
Yeah.
so I tend to use a spray bottle of water, but I don't use water until I complete the whole block. I do a measure as you go, and so I'm squaring up the block as I get to the big piece, the regular size block. But after it's completely done, then I will spray it with water and press it nice and flat. But I know you use steam throughout the whole process. So I mean, again, that's personal preference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not only do I use steam, it is like on the hottest setting and the highest steam setting function pretty much at all times. And I feel like when I'm using my iron and then I run out of water and I haven't had steam for a certain steam, like I can tell the difference in that I either doesn't press as quickly or I don't feel like it presses the same. So just like with our steam allowances, the way we're talking about that, like whatever your preference, I would stick with that in terms of consistency, so you know that all of your seams are going to be pressed the same each time.
Right, and I have found sometimes when you use steam and you've got a lot of bias edges, sometimes they can get distorted when you have water, steam and you're
Yeah.
pressing. Unless I mean, if you're pressing flat, which is what you're supposed to be doing when you're doing quilting instead of ironing, which is back and forth movement. If you're doing that, um, then your seams are going to be flat and they're not going to be moving. But if you're doing an ironing motion, sometimes you just with steam you distort those seams. And the other thing is you want to have a pressing mat that is firm. You don't want something that real fluffy, because the firmer the mat is, like a wool mat or what's the other one? I can't think of the other one, but those will give you a better seam, a better press if you're using something flat instead of something real soft.
I have to say, I think we found yet another thing that you and I are opposite on again, because I have my flat iron or ironing board, I'm sorry, and then on top of my ironing board, I mean, it's still fairly sturdy. It's not like I'm pressing on a pillow, but it
Yeah.
is a stuffed, fairly puffy mat. And so I do prefer that too. So yeah, we might be as opposite as possible in terms of most of our techniques.
Well, I mean, if you're doing applique, you do want a little fluff in there because you want that applique to stick up a little bit.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I like my wool ironing mat because it's nice and firm and it doesn't get real hot. Um,
Yep.
and so it retains those seams.
Perfect. I have to say the wool pressing mat, I've been looking into those, but I have yet to find a definitive answer on whether I can continue to use my super aggressive steaming action on the wool mat, because sometimes they're saying it doesn't maybe dry all the way underneath. You'd have to keep flipping them over.
Yeah.
So I've sort of shied away from the wool mat because I like so much steam, but
Oh, no, that's a good question. I have no idea.
I don't either. I have to figure that out before I use it. So I do want to say I think we might still be having some technical difficulties. I'm not sure if people can actually see us or not. So I don't want to ask any questions that are going to require you to show or demonstrate anything. But I know at the beginning you mentioned that along with this challenge, obviously there are multiple ways that you can make things half square triangles. Um, flying geese, the things that make up these blocks, you provide something along with this pattern that shows several different ways to do things, correct?
Right. Yeah, there's a general instructions page. My screen says standby, so I don't know if that makes a difference or not. But there's a general instructions page that gives you 2 different ways of making flying geese. It also talks about half square triangles and quarter square triangles and flip and sew methods. So there are a couple different instructions in it, and a lot of times I'll say use the method that you like the best. If you're
Yeah.
comfortable with one method more than another, then use that method, because if that's what gives you better results, then use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, again, that you can download at any time throughout the challenge. So, you could be 3 blocks into it and then decide, I want to check back to see this general instructions and maybe see a different way to do this. But I see a question that came in here from Jeanette. She wants to know, how can I join the challenge? So several different ways. So there's a banner on the page. It should be above or below the video you're watching now, depending on where you're watching. And you can click on that, and all you have to do is enter in your email to sign up for it. You'll then see download fabric requirements. You can download those right away. Today was the first official launch start of the challenge, so emails are going out. And you will continue to get emails each week with the block instructions. So as Toby mentioned at the beginning, it's 3 blocks a week, which I know kind of sounds like a lot, but Toby, 3 blocks is definitely manageable, correct?
Yeah, they're not real hard blocks. I mean, I think they took, even for a beginner, it might take a couple hours when you get started on the first block. But a lot of the blocks are similar. So once you
Mhm.
get that technique down, the rest of the blocks start getting easier and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we mentioned, with all of these blocks, as they're being put together and as we're going through this challenge, Toby and I are both going to be available for help if anyone has any questions. Toby does a blog post that goes along each week with the specific blocks that we're making. I'll also be doing some live check-ins on the Facebook group page. And of course, our Facebook group page has quite a number of people on there who are very experienced sewers and quilters themselves. So if you have any questions, you can just post that. And I know people are going to answer pretty quickly. So again, we definitely encourage you to sign up for the challenge. And if you have any additional questions along the way, don't hesitate to post those. But Toby, I want to thank you for being here to talk about the challenge with us and answer a couple of quilting questions. And you stayed with us through all of our technical difficulties. So thank you very much.
Okay, we're not doing this for an hour then?
No, I think we're having a couple issues. I'm seeing that people can't see us. So that's why I know.
Okay.
I know I can see you. I think we're on a weird little preview screen. But no, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. But again, I want to thank you for being here to talk about the challenge.
Okay. And I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's blocks and fabrics.
Yes, absolutely. Be sure to post pictures along the way, and I'm sure we'll have you back on throughout this whole challenge, either later on this month or next month, and throughout the whole challenge to talk more about it. So thank you again.
Okay, thanks.